want to take a look at this video from the congregation in the church during yesterday's event that was really geared toward black voters. When you pull out to see the crowd, it seems like what we're looking at are more white Trump supporters. So was the audience mostly white, and you know, did that message of outreach to the black community actually hit its target?
To be frank, I was very surprised who were there. There were famous rappers that I don't even know, but my children, my 15-year-old, he knew. I was surprised, to be very frank and honest with you, about how many black people were actually physically in the building. I remember walking down Grand River, a place that is absolutely desolate on the west side of Detroit, walking down the street and just inviting people, just saying, hey, the former president's here. If you want to come. And they were just laughing like I was when I first was approached. So I walked them through the front of the line, through Secret Service, and they were there. And to be able to see that in terms of outreach, I did think it was something that, quite frankly, surprised me as well.
That has been Pastor Lorenzo Sewell. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you. And now with me is Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony, who is the president of the Detroit branch of the NAACP and a pastor in Detroit at Fellowship Chapel. Dr. Anthony, thank you for being here as well. Let's start with your take on Donald Trump's visit to that Detroit church, which we were just talking about yesterday, along with Reverend Sewell. What's your sort of takeaway?
Thank you, Attorney Coleman. Obviously, you articulated what needed to be said within your commentary, your narrative. First of all, it was not an outreach, it was an inreach. You called it right. There were more white folk there than African-American folk who were there. And in fact, he was coming to charge and to talk to the African-American community. He did not. It is amazing to me how one could utilize the Black church, a sacred institution, to propel your pernicious, perilous bargainings relative to what you want to do to propel your political concerns. It's not a question of coming in for policy. He did not articulate any policy. He articulated the fact that he wanted to come and get some black votes. But whereas a policy, we believe in policy. The very community that he came in needs education. You just heard the pastor talk about that. They need the infusion of economic development and small business loans. Having gold gem shoes with red bottoms, putting your face on a T-shirt behind prison bars, that's not policy. Coming in, talking about $16 billion for HBCUs, education, that's policy. Having an infrastructure bill to create jobs and opportunities in the same community that this pastor is from, that's policy. Talking about a policy where people are treated fairly and equitably by the criminal justice system. Trump talked about wanting to conclude and end crime. Well, why don't you institute the crime bill? Why don't you pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act? That's policy. Why don't you pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act? That's policy. Talking about what you're going to do with some kind of platinum plan when you had an opportunity to do, that's really frivolity. That's not policy. Holding a Bible upside down in front of a church, talking about you love the Lord, when you never open up the book to see what the Lord says in terms of loving your neighbor as yourself, treating people like you want to be treated. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me water. I was a prisoner and you came to see me. Those are policies. That's what we need. We don't need people to stand up on frivolity. We need you to come in and talk about policy. We know what you have done. The question is, if you have another chance, we'll see what you will yet do, which is not in our specific interest.
Now, Dr. Anthony, I got to stop you before you preach another sermon. You already worked today. I got more questions for you. Donald Trump sat down recently for another interview with Semaphore and had this to say. I have so many black friends that if I were racist, they wouldn't be my friends. They would know better than anybody and fast. He told me they would not be with me for 2 minutes if they thought I was a racist, and I'm not a racist. Is this an effective appeal to black voters? I know you talked about policy, but at the same time, there are a portion of black electorate members, particularly black men, who feel as though they are not being spoken to? Is there a danger that Donald Trump may appeal to this particular demographic in a way that takes away votes from the Democratic Party?
Charles, I hear you. There's always a concern relative to people who are going for the okie doke. That means going for the misnomer, the miscommunication. The fact that Donald Trump comes in and talks about what he's done for black people, look at the record. By your fruit, you shall know them. You just called out what he has not done with regards to the Central Park Five. He never apologized for it. He wants them to get the death penalty. He has called black people really S-hole countries. He has not targeted Haiti and the Congo and Ethiopia and the Sudan, in addition to what's happening in Gaza and the relief there to relieve our folk there. He is against educational enhancement. He has not talked about a program to assist HBCUs. He wants to end Social Security as we know it and privatize it. That preacher's mother, grandmother, members are getting Social Security, I would imagine. Some of them folk in their church. We need to make sure that we have it. Look at the records. When you look at the record, it is clear. I think Donald Trump has a song that he likes. It's by Oscar Brown Jr. I've heard him quoted. He talks about a snake that a woman had pity on and she took him in. She took him in, and the snake, once she took him up, fed him, gave him clothing that he would wear, gave him everything that he needed. The snake turned around and bit her and said, "Oh, woman, you knew I was a snake when you took me in. Don't fall for the snake, because every time you're going to get bit."
Dr. Wendell Anthony, thank you for your time. And on this